Hey there guys, and welcome to this next lesson. In today's lesson we're going to be working on the kinds of clothing we might see in the characters in the RPG and video game world. The designs can change a lot depending on the class that you might want to use. We're going to continue working with the Mage Support class, and we're going to be talking about the main points we should keep in mind when designing their clothing, as these kind of mobility points are going to be necessary for the character to be able to move in a correct and comfortable way within the game. So they need to have a certain logic to them. So it's true that with women, the designs are quite oriented towards them showing as much skin as possible, but you know. Ugh. So, here, I'm indicating the necessary points we're going to be working on our design, to design our suit in the most functional way possible. In the support's case, in the War Mage's case, what we're going to be seeing here on the left, we can find that the elbows, the waist, and the knees are uncovered, as they are the points that the character needs to be able to move, to be able to quickly avoid any kind of attack, and to be able to give the necessary support to the rest of the team. Normally speaking, we're going to find within this character style a series of concrete characteristics that make them all quite noticeable within the game. For example, we would have the magic wand, or the staff, or the capes they might wear, very exaggerated capes. Think Doctor Strange. Or maybe some kind of dress that might reflect what the character's type may be. Right now, I'm working as if our character, the dummy I'm drawing on, was more of a masculine suit. But this kind of brief adaptation of what I did on the left. Okay? I'm going to keep the same proportions and the same movement points as the ones we were talking about, so that we can work on our design. So yeah, try to be as creative as possible when creating some kind of pattern on our suit. And for example, I decided to add in that kind of high neck collar. The high neck is just more aesthetic than it is functional, really, if we're being honest, but it does stand out more. Let's give him maybe some long sleeves that sort of hang down, and maybe some points like we can see in the elbows, or that are more necessary when he's going to, cast a spell or whatever. And for this reason, we're going to need more flexibility and mobility to be able to work with the hands. Okay, so I'm going to finish off with the shoes. Maybe this isn't going to be a super important factor, but we're going to make his shoes the most similar we can to the rest of the clothes. Then if you want to put any more decorative details or whatever, like for example, I used some things that's like pointy and stuff, something that's a bit more aggressive so that we can differentiate from a warrior mage, a druid, or something like that. Okay. So for the internal decoration, you could try to look for some kind of image that you might be convinced by. Maybe when you're adding in details, maybe you'll have to imagine something that's a bit crazier within the details and representation. Maybe something like a belt or something like that would complement even more what we could call objects that a magician would have. Like in the suit. For example, I've added in a belt. You might want to give this guy like a chain, or maybe try to think of how the magician would be. He might have to have some kind of external tool just in case, or maybe a series of spices or magic powders or whatever. Whatever you might imagine. It might be someone who is a healer and is trying to preserve the health of the rest of the party, so they're dependent on this guy. This is something more to do with the functional side of things. We want a cool aesthetic with our suit. It still has to be, it has to help to be something that is of use to the character. Okay, now I'm going to try and make another suit, this time using the same movement points that we made with the first one. But I'm going to try and vary the design a little bit. This way, we're going to be able to see that there are many possibilities and varieties, all depending on the creativity you guys add to this when you sit down to design it from scratch. I also recommend you look for as many references as you can. You have to become kind of imbued by everything you might like. And yeah, in this case, for example, I liked the buckle in that circle that I put right on that stomach there that I used in all three designs. So maybe I want to grab that and I want to try and adapt it to the rest of the designs that I want to do. In this case, even though I put that buckle there and that belt, if you look closely, the fabric is quite baggy. So, as this is the movement point that we need, the fabric isn't going to stop that movement because it's not too tight. It's not something that the character can't move. I'm going to make this one to be a little bit lighter, okay? A little softer, not too tight to the body. And this way, what we're going to get is another completely different style. For example, this tunic here could be much closer to the floor, and it's not going to be a problem for the character's movement. Okay, so I'm going to put in the last details on this bottom part here. And I'm going to move on to the top part. So maybe like a bracelet. So yeah, I want to remind you that like accessories like rings or necklaces or jewelry that might represent like a buff to the character is going to be, it's totally allowed. You can do that. We're going to put this collar more ornamented than functional, but it's going to be a lot more notable for the character. So yeah, you can do whatever you want with the decoration because in the end, if you don't like the result, you can erase it and try to start again. I'm going to remind you that the functional points of the character are in the shoulders. Okay, so waist, elbows, and knees as well. Okay, so this will be a summary of what we could do to represent the different types of suits that our character might have. In this case, we will be talking about the support class. With jewelry, my advice is that you start basically, apart from looking for references, something that that's always going to be my recommendation. Try to think how you would like your character to be linked to this jewelry. Maybe it's a character that's good, or maybe they're bad. And if you start to think with supports and the medieval theme, we have like dragons, skulls, mystic themes are going to be easily combined when they're created, when we're creating these weird jewelry bits. In this case, for example, I made a skull thing with wings, kind of like a little demon, to make a kind of evil ring, okay? You can also grab different elements and try to combine them to get something that's quite curious. So this would be like maybe a dragon's eye. Well, let's just say that. So from here, we're going to create a different style of jewelry to create, for example, another ring. Let's make another ring. We're going to go around it with a little bit of an edge that's going to represent what's holding the dragon's eye. And as I've said, these are like buffs. Like, let's say that in this case, the last ring I made, that is going to give us the strength of a dragon or whatever, okay? It's our own character in our own world, all right? No one can tell you what to do. All right. So I'm going to continue explaining complements that your character might use to apply. Okay, so for example, with the rings, for example, there are so many different ones that they might represent something fundamental so that the support in this case can work, or maybe this is going to be the support's power source. Like, they're not going to use a wand or anything like that. They're going to channel their power through the ring, okay? So this is kind of similar to the weapons designs, okay? They might carry, as I was saying about the wands, they might be wooden, metal, ice, or whatever you guys want to represent them with. For example, when we say mage and wand, we do actually go straight to the typical wands. The ones that are made of wood, like a little stick, okay? So, the classical ones. We can see them in almost any movie. But here, we're the ones that decide what we're going to design. For example, I'm going to draw a wand that's going to be made of metal and tied to a rock, okay? So magical rock. And that's where the magic is going to stem from in our attack tool or defense tool. Or maybe it heals. Whatever you want, okay? I made it sharper so we can use it like a stabby kind of weapon, like a sword, maybe. It all depends on what you guys want. Okay. So you can also imitate the size that we might see the weapons in, that support characters have, okay? I've drawn them small, but in the previous drawing, they were drawn in pretty big. It was like a big staff the mage is holding, okay? And, okay. This is going to be basic with mages, okay? Maybe they represent more strength and are more related to, like, war mages. So yeah, this is going to be everything in this part of the lesson. We're going to be moving on with the mages and stuff, okay? So I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye!